He thought the military dog would stay by his side forever, but that was a mistaken belief, because recently the army had labeled his Belgian Malinois as too aggressive for civilian life. They claimed her training made her unfit to remain with David after his medical discharge. After this trial, they intended to deploy her to a high-risk security operation, a decision that felt like a betrayal after all they had endured together in Afghanistan. Before you continue with the story, where in the world are you listening? Subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. The judge's gavel struck the table like thunder before a downpour. It silenced the whispers in the courtroom, plunging them into stillness. But for the man standing in the center of this room, that sound couldn't drown out the thoughts haunting his mind. That from today, the Belgian Malinois sitting beside him, Bella, would be taken from him forever. Bella, a female dog with an alert posture as if she were on a battlefield. Her sharp gaze swept the room, her ears twitching at every sound. The judge, with a serious demeanor, adjusted her glasses before speaking. "Sergeant Torres," she said, her voice firm but tinged with curiosity, "the Army's report states that this dog poses a danger to public safety. Their request to reassign her is under consideration, but the outcome, as you can predict, may mean today is the last time Bella is by your side. Do you have anything to say before the jury delivers its final verdict?" David took a deep breath, his voice calm despite the emotions threatening to erupt. "Your Honor," he began, "not only is Bella not dangerous, but she is a hero. She saved my squad from an IED that could have killed us all. After leaving the battlefield, she saved a few kids in my neighborhood before stray dogs could harm them. She's not a risk. She's the only reason I'm standing here today. Please, allow me to feed Bella her favorite meal one last time." As he spoke, one hand touched the scars on his face, the countless marks left by war. The entire room fell silent, the weight of his plea hanging in the air. Elderly women spectators wiped tears, while even the toughest men nodded in empathy. The judge's expression remained impassive, but her gaze lingered on David's scarred face and Bella's steadfast stance. After a moment, she leaned forward. "Your service is noted, Sergeant, but the regulations are clear. However, I will allow you to feed Bella, and she will remain in the courtroom during this hearing, after which—" But before the judge could finish her sentence, a low growl rumbled from Bella's chest. As David tightened his grip on the Belgian Malinois' leash, he noticed her body stiffen and her ears stand up. The sound was soft at first, barely audible, but it grew into a series of sharp, relentless barks that shattered the courtroom's calm. Her gaze locked onto a man in a crisp military uniform seated among the witnesses, a Lieutenant David vaguely recognized from his unit. The judge's gavel slammed down, her voice sharp. "Sergeant Torres, control your dog." But David shook his head, his eyes wide with recognition. "Your Honor, Bella doesn't bark like this without reason," he said, his voice urgent. "She's trained to detect threats, explosives, enemies, danger. Something's wrong." The courtroom erupted into murmurs, the tension spiking as all eyes turned to Bella. The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face paling as Bella's barks grew louder, her teeth bared. The bailiff stepped forward, his hand hovering near his holster, but David raised a hand. "Wait," he said, his voice steady. "Let me check." He knelt beside Bella, following her gaze to the lieutenant's briefcase, placed discreetly under his chair. Bella lunged forward, her leash straining as she pawed at the case, her barks echoing like gunfire. The lieutenant stood abruptly, his voice shaky. "This is absurd," he snapped. "The dog's out of control. Remove it immediately." But the judge's eyes narrowed, her earlier composure giving way to unease. "Bailiff," she said, her voice low and commanding. "Inspect that briefcase." "Now!" The bailiff hesitated, then approached the lieutenant, who protested loudly as the case was opened. The room fell deathly silent as the bailiff's hands froze, his face draining of color. Nestled among folders was a small metallic device with a blinking red light, a remote trigger, unmistakably military grade. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and the lieutenant's protest died in his throat. David's heart pounded, his eyes locked on Bella, who stood firm, her bark subsiding into a low, menacing growl. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling with realization, "Bella just saved us all. That's no accident. Someone brought that here for a reason." The judge, her usual composure shattered, gripped her gavel so tightly her knuckles whitened as she stared at the device. "Bailiffs, secure the lieutenant and that device immediately. I want a bomb squad and a forensic team here now." Her eyes darted to David and Bella, a flicker of unease betraying her otherwise stern demeanor. "Sergeant Torres, you and the dog stay close. We're not done here." As the bailiffs handcuffed the lieutenant, his protest grew frantic. "This is a mistake," he shouted, his face slick with sweat. "I don't know how that got there. You can't pin this on me." But his words were drowned out by the murmurs of the spectators, who whispered in panicked tones, their earlier sympathy for David now mixed with fear. David knelt beside Bella, his hand resting on her head. "Good girl," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. But his eyes caught the lieutenant's fleeting glance toward a shadowy figure at the back of the courtroom, slipping out unnoticed. Bella's ears twitched, and David knew this was only the beginning of the mystery she had uncovered. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory from Afghanistan. The lieutenant, part of his former unit, had always been overly curious about Bella's training, asking pointed questions about her ability to detect explosives and track targets. David had brushed it off as professional interest, but now the truth felt like a blade against his throat. Bella's skills made her a target, and someone wanted her silenced. The bailiff approached, his expression grim. "Sergeant, we need you and the dog in a secure room while we sweep the courthouse," he said. "That device wasn't a prop. It's live. If Bella hadn't found it, we'd all be—" He trailed off, shaking his head. David nodded, his grip tightening on Bella's leash. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. As they followed the bailiff through a side corridor, Bella suddenly stiffened, her ears flicking back as a low growl rumbled from her chest. Her nose twitched, sniffing the air with urgent precision, her gaze fixed on a locked storage closet at the end of the hall. "Bella, what's wrong?" David asked, his pulse quickening. The bailiff frowned, his hand hovering near his weapon. "It's just a closet," he said, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. Bella's growls deepened, her body coiled as she pawed at the door, her barks sharp and insistent. David's instincts, honed by years of trusting Bella's senses, kicked in. "Check it," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. The bailiff hesitated, then drew his keys, unlocking the closet with a trembling hand. The door creaked open, revealing a tangle of cleaning supplies in a small black duffel bag tucked in the corner. A faint ticking sound emanated from within, barely audible but unmistakable. The bailiff's face paled. "Another device," he whispered, stepping back as if the bag might detonate at any moment. Bella barked furiously, her body rigid, her eyes locked on the bag. David's heart pounded, his mind flashing back to Afghanistan, where Bella's nose had saved his squad from a hidden ID. "Get the bomb squad," he said, his voice urgent. "She's not wrong." The bailiff radioed for backup, his voice shaking as he relayed the situation. Within moments, the corridor was filled with security personnel, their faces grim as they cordoned off the area. The bomb squad arrived, their equipment clattering as they carefully extracted the bag. The lead technician, a woman with a steady hand, opened it to reveal a second remote trigger, wired to a small explosive charge. "This was set to go off during the hearing," she said, her voice low. "Your dog just saved this entire building." David's chest tightened, his eyes meeting Bella's. "Good girl," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. But the weight of the discovery pressed down on him. Two devices in one courthouse, both military grade, suggested a coordinated attack, and the lieutenant wasn't acting alone. The shadowy figure David had seen fleeing the courtroom loomed in his mind, a silent promise of more danger to come. The judge's voice crackled over the bailiff's radio. "Get Torres and the dog to a secure location," she ordered, "and I want the lieutenant interrogated immediately. Someone's targeting this case, and I want to know why." As David and Bella were escorted out of the courthouse, the chaos of sirens and shouting faded into the background. David's hand rested on Bella's head, her steady presence grounding him amidst the whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. The devices, the lieutenant, the fleeting figure, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle, one that Bella had begun to unravel. "We're not done yet, girl," David whispered, his resolve hardening. "Whatever they're hiding, we're going to find it." But as they stepped into the armored vehicle, Bella's ears twitched, her gaze fixed on the horizon. A faint glint of metal caught David's eye. A sniper's scope flashing briefly from a distant rooftop before vanishing. Bella's growl returned, low and menacing, and David knew the mystery she had uncovered was far from over, and the fight to protect her had only just begun. The armored vehicle rumbled through the night, its headlights cutting through the dense fog that cloaked the rural road. Inside, Sergeant David Torres sat in tense silence, his hand resting on Bella's head as the Belgian Malinois lay alert at his feet. Her ears twitched at every sound, her sharp eyes glinting in the dim interior. The events at the courthouse, the remote triggers, the detained lieutenant, the fleeting glimpse of a sniper's scope, had left David's nerves raw. Bella's instincts had saved the entire courtroom, but the danger was far from over. Someone was targeting them, and David knew they wouldn't stop until Bella was out of the picture. The bailiff, Officer Reynolds, gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "We're taking you to a secure facility," he said, his voice low but strained. "The judge has ordered a full lockdown until we get answers. The lieutenant's in custody, but he's not talking yet. Those devices were no prank. Someone wanted that hearing stopped, and they're not done." David's jaw tightened, his mind racing. "It's about Bella," he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "She's not just a dog to them. Her training, her ability to detect explosives, track targets, it's worth millions to the wrong people. That's why they want her reassigned, isn't it? To control her." Reynolds glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his expression grim. "You're not wrong. The bomb squad traced the triggers to a black market supplier linked to private militias. The lieutenant's just a cog in a bigger machine. We're digging into his contacts, but—" His words were cut off as Bella suddenly stood, her body rigid, a deep growl rumbling from her chest, her gaze locked on the window, her nose sniffing the air with frantic intensity. "Bella, what's wrong?" David asked, his pulse spiking. Reynolds frowned, his eyes darting to the road. "It's probably just the stress," he said, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. Bella's growls escalated into sharp, relentless barks, her claws scraping the vehicle's floor as she pressed against the window. David's instincts kicked in, years of trusting Bella's senses overriding any doubt. "Slow down," he said, his tone sharp. "She's not barking for nothing. Something's out there." Reynolds hesitated, then eased off the gas, the vehicle slowing as the fog thickened around them. The road was eerily quiet, the only sound Bella's barks echoing in the confined space. Then a faint glint of metal flashed in the fog ahead. A tripwire, stretched taut across the road, nearly invisible in the haze. David's heart stopped. "Stop!" he shouted, grabbing the dashboard. Reynolds slammed on the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a halt just inches from the wire. Bella's barks reached a fever pitch, her body coiled as if ready to leap through the window. Reynolds's face drained of color. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his hands trembling as he peered into the fog. David's mind flashed back to Afghanistan, where Bella's nose had saved his squad from a similar trap. "It's an ambush," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Get us out of here, now." Before Reynolds could shift into reverse, a deafening explosion rocked the night, a fireball erupting from the woods to their left. The shock wave rattled the vehicle, shards of debris pinging off its armored frame. Bella lunged forward, her barks drowned out by the chaos as muzzle flashes lit up the fog. Bullets struck the vehicle, their impacts ringing like hammer blows. "Hold on!" Reynolds yelled, flooring the gas as he swerved off the road, the vehicle crashing through underbrush to avoid the gunfire. David braced himself, his arm around Bella, who remained steadfast, her growls a constant warning. "They knew we were coming," David said, his voice tight with realization. "Someone tipped them off." Reynolds's radio crackled with static, the judge's voice cutting through. "Reynolds, report! What's happening?" But before he could respond, a second explosion erupted behind them, the road disintegrating in a cloud of smoke and flame. The vehicle lurched, its tires screeching as Reynolds fought to maintain control. David's eyes met Bella's, her unwavering gaze grounding him amidst the chaos. "Stay with me, girl," he whispered, his hand tightening on her leash. He turned to Reynolds, his voice resolute. "We can't outrun them. Find cover. We need to hold them off until backup arrives." Reynolds nodded, steering the vehicle into a dense thicket, the fog providing temporary cover. As they scrambled out, Bella leapt to the ground, her nose low, sniffing for threats. The gunfire grew closer, the attackers' footsteps crunching through the underbrush. David drew a sidearm from Reynolds' holster, his training kicking in despite the years since his last combat mission. "Bella, stay sharp," he said, his voice steady. She barked once, her body poised like a coiled spring, her senses locked on the approaching danger. The fog parted briefly, revealing a group of armed figures in tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. One of them raised a weapon, but Bella was faster, lunging forward with a snarl, her jaws clamping onto the man's arm. He screamed, dropping his rifle as David fired, forcing the others to scatter. Reynolds radioed for backup, his voice urgent. "We're under attack. Multiple hostiles, military-grade weapons. Send help now." But as the words left his mouth, a low hum filled the air. A drone, its red lights blinking ominously through the fog. Bella's barks turned frantic, her gaze fixed on the sky. David's heart sank. "They're not just after Bella," he said, his voice grim. "They're after anyone who knows what she found." The drone's hum grew louder, a payload glinting beneath it, and David knew they were running out of time. Bella pressed against his leg, her growl a defiant promise that she wouldn't let him face this alone. The fog-laden woods were a battlefield, the air thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the distant crackle of gunfire. Sergeant David Torres crouched behind a fallen log, his sidearm gripped tightly as Bella, his Belgian Malinois, stood vigilant beside him. Her low growls cut through the chaos, her sharp eyes locked on the shadowy figures moving through the mist. The drone's ominous hum loomed overhead, its red lights pulsing like a predator's eyes. Officer Reynolds, the bailiff, was pressed against a nearby tree, his radio spitting static as he relayed their position to backup. The ambush had turned their escape into a fight for survival, and Bella's instincts were their only edge. "Stay low," David whispered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Bella's ears flicked, her body coiled as she sniffed the air, her senses attuned to every threat. The attackers, clad in tactical gear, were closing in, their movements coordinated and relentless. David's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the day. The remote triggers in the courthouse, the lieutenant's betrayal, the sniper's scope. This wasn't just about Bella's reassignment. Someone wanted her abilities controlled or eliminated at any cost. The drone's hum grew louder, its silhouette looming through the fog. David's heart sank as he spotted a small payload glinting beneath it, a bomb primed to drop. "Reynolds, we need to move," he shouted, but before they could act, Bella sprang forward, her barks ferocious as she darted toward the nearest attacker. Her jaws clamped onto the man's leg, dragging him down with a guttural scream. The distraction gave David a split second to fire, his shots forcing the others to take cover. Reynolds scrambled to David's side, his face pale but determined. "Backup's 10 minutes out," he gasped, reloading his weapon. "We can't hold them that long. That drone's going to—" His words were cut off by a sharp whistle from above, the drone diving toward their position. David grabbed Bella's leash, yanking her back as they dove behind the log. The payload detonated meters away, the explosion sending a wave of heat and debris over them. The ground shook, trees splintering as the fog lit up with an orange glow. Bella barked furiously, undeterred by the blast, her body pressed against David as if shielding him. "Good girl," David said, his voice hoarse as he brushed dirt from her coat. But the attackers were regrouping, their voices barking orders in a language David didn't recognize. He caught a glimpse of one man adjusting a device on his wrist, a controller, likely for the drone. "Reynolds," David said, his eyes narrowing, "we take out that guy. We stop the drone." Reynolds nodded, his jaw tight. "Cover me," he said, darting toward a cluster of trees. David fired at the attackers, drawing their attention as Bella growled, her senses locked on the man with the controller. In a flash, she bolted forward, weaving through the underbrush with uncanny speed. The man barely had time to react before Bella leapt, her jaws snapping onto his wrist. The controller clattered to the ground, its screen flickering as the drone above wobbled, then crashed into the trees with a deafening crunch. The attackers faltered, their coordination breaking as Bella's ferocity disrupted their ranks. David seized the moment, rushing forward to secure the fallen controller. He smashed it under his boot, ensuring the drone was out of play. Reynolds rejoined him, panting but resolute. "Nice work, Bella," he said, but his eyes darted to the horizon, where the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the fog. The attackers, realizing their advantage was lost, began to retreat, melting into the mist. But one of them paused, turning to face David. His mask obscured his face, but his voice was cold and deliberate. "You can't protect her forever, Torres," he said, his accent clipped. "She's too valuable. We'll be back." With that, he vanished, leaving only the echo of his words. David's chest heaved, his grip tightening on Bella's leash as she returned to his side, her growls fading into a protective stance. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. Reynolds clapped David on the shoulder. "We made it," he said, but his voice was heavy with unease. "For now." As the tactical team swept in, securing the area, David knelt beside Bella, his hand resting on her head. "You saved us again," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. But the masked man's warning lingered like a shadow. The remote triggers, the ambush, the drone, they were all part of a larger plan, one that centered on Bella's extraordinary abilities. David's thoughts turned to the lieutenant, still in custody. If he was just a pawn, who was pulling the strings? The lead officer from the tactical team approached, her expression grim. "We found something on one of the attackers," she said, holding up a small encrypted phone. "It's got a single contact listed, a code name, Spectre. We're tracing it now, but this goes deeper than we thought. You and that dog are in the crosshairs." David's gaze met Bella's, her unwavering eyes a reminder of why he couldn't back down. "Let them come," he said, his voice resolute. "We're not running." But as the team escorted them to a new safe house, Bella's ears twitched, her nose sniffing the air. A faint metallic scent lingered, unnoticed by the humans. A tracker, planted somewhere close. The fight was far from over, and Bella knew it. The new safe house was a fortress of concrete and steel, hidden deep in an industrial district far from the fog-laden woods where David Torres and Bella had narrowly escaped death. Inside, the air was heavy with tension, the faint hum of security monitors the only sound breaking the silence. David sat at a metal table, his scarred hands clasped tightly as he studied the encrypted phone recovered from the ambush. The single contact listed, Spectre, was the key to unraveling the conspiracy that had targeted Bella, his loyal Belgian Malinois, who now lay alert at his feet, her ears twitching at every sound. Officer Reynolds, bruised but resolute after the attack, stood by a monitor displaying forensic reports. "The phone's encryption is military grade," he said, his voice grim, "but the tech team cracked it. Spectre isn't just a code name. It's tied to a shell company funneling funds to the black market supplier of those triggers. The trail leads to someone high up, someone with access to classified operations." David's jaw tightened, his eyes meeting Bella's. Her unwavering gaze grounded him, a reminder of why they couldn't stop now. "They want Bella because of what she can do," he said, his voice steady. "Her training makes her a weapon to them, a tool for their dirty work. We need to find Spectre before they come for her again." Reynolds nodded, but before he could respond, Bella stood abruptly, her body tense, a low growl rumbling from her chest. Her nose twitched, sniffing the air with urgent precision, her gaze fixed on the safe house's reinforced door. David's pulse spiked. "She's sensing something," he said, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Reynolds frowned, checking the security feed. "The perimeter's clear," he said, but his voice wavered. Bella's barks erupted, sharp and relentless, her claws scraping the concrete floor. The monitors flickered, then went dark, plunging the room into an eerie silence. A faint metallic clink echoed from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable hiss of gas seeping through the vents. "They've breached the system!" Reynolds shouted, coughing as the air grew thick with a choking haze. David grabbed Bella's leash, his eyes stinging as he pulled her toward a side exit. "We're not trapped yet," he said, his voice resolute. "Bella, lead the way." Bella surged forward, her nose guiding them through the smoke-filled corridor, her barks cutting through the chaos. They burst into a maintenance room, where a single monitor still flickered, displaying a hacked security feed. David froze, his breath catching as the screen showed a figure in a tailored suit standing in the safe house's control room. The man's face was partially obscured, but his voice, cold and commanding, crackled through the speaker. "Torres, you're out of time," he said. "Hand over the dog, or this ends in blood." David's heart pounded, recognition dawning. That voice, it belonged to General Marcus Holt, a decorated officer who had overseen David's unit in Afghanistan. Holt, known for his ruthless sufficiency, had been suspiciously absent during the courthouse hearing. "Spectre," David whispered, his voice thick with betrayal. "It's him." Reynolds, struggling to breathe, radioed for backup, his voice urgent. "We've got a high-ranking officer involved. Send federal agents now." But Bella's barks grew frantic, her gaze locked on a locked cabinet in the corner. David followed her lead, prying it open to reveal a hidden server, its lights blinking rapidly. "This is how they hacked the safe house," he said, yanking out a USB drive embedded in the server. "It's got to have everything, Holt's plans, his contacts." The gas thickened, and footsteps echoed from the hallway. Holt's mercenaries closing in. David tucked the USB into his pocket, his resolve hardening. "Bella, we're getting out of here," he said, kicking open a service hatch leading to an underground tunnel. Bella leapt through, her senses guiding them through the dark as gunfire erupted behind them. Reynolds covered their retreat, his shots buying precious seconds. The tunnel opened into a deserted warehouse, where federal agents were already converging, their vehicles flooding the area with light. David and Bella emerged, gasping for air, as agents swarmed the safe house apprehending Holt's mercenaries. But Holt himself was nowhere to be found, until Bella's nose twitched, her growls leading David to a concealed trapdoor in the warehouse floor. David pried it open, revealing a hidden bunker where Holt stood, an encrypted laptop open before him. The general's eyes narrowed, his hand hovering over a detonator. "You're too late, Torres," he said, his voice icy. "Bella's skills belong to my clients now. One press, and this whole place goes up." Bella lunged before Holt could act, her jaws clamping onto his wrist. The detonator clattered to the ground, and David tackled Holt, pinning him as agents stormed in. "It's over," David said, his voice steady. "You're done." Bella stood guard, her growls a testament to her unwavering loyalty. The USB drive, analyzed by federal agents, exposed Holt's network, a web of corrupt officials and private militias profiting from black market deals involving military dogs like Bella. Holt, revealed as Spectre, was arrested, his empire crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The judge, shaken by the ordeal, overturned the Army's reassignment order, granting David permanent custody of Bella in recognition of their heroism. Days later, David stood on a quiet hill overlooking the city, Bella at his side, her tail wagging as she chased a stray leaf in the golden sunlight. The scars of their fight remained, but so did their bond, stronger than ever. "We did it, girl," David said softly, kneeling to scratch her ears. "You're home." But as they walked away, Bella's ears twitched, her gaze lingering on the horizon. A faint, encrypted signal, missed by the agents, pulsed from a distant server. Holt's final contingency, waiting for someone new to claim it. The fight was won, but Bella's instincts whispered that their story wasn't over. The end, or is it? What did you think of David and Bella's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more heart-pounding stories.